Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to dive into LoRa and its different kind of variants. So there are a bunch of different variants of LoRa out there because LoRa is a very famous post-training technique, and picking the right method for LoRa is really important because it can essentially make or break the training that you're going to pursue. Most of the people just end up choosing vanilla LoRa by default, but that's not what we are going to do today. We are going to look at 8 different variations of LoRa really quickly. We're going to give 1 minute per LoRa variant, and we're going to find out what they are, why they work out the way they do, where you could use them, and if there are some trade-offs, what are they? So that by the end of this, you'll have a better context on which LoRa variation and which LoRa technique you should pick for your particular use case. So let's drill down into some of these. Let's start with vanilla LoRa, or the very baseline method that we have out there. Now, vanilla LoRa is very famous, and it is very ubiquitous. It has over 3,000 citations. It's practically present all over across on almost every major cloud service out there. You could be using models from OpenAI, like the GPT OSS, or from Hugging Face, or RunPod, or Fireworks, or whatever. All cloud services, all sorts of models have been post-trained by LoRa almost at this point, since it's vanilla LoRa at this point, since it's such a famous method. Um, it has a lot of real world use cases because it does allow you for domain adaptation. Multi-tenant SaaS platforms are a great place where you could have like many customer specific adapters to take into account. uh, and it's very famous for like enterprise co-pilots and knowledge workers and stuff. In terms of the performance profile for vanilla LoRa, it's a fairly stable, robust, and reliable point method because it has a very predictable convergence, and its full merging capability is unparalleled. It also works on a lot of our transformer architectures, and its hyperparameters are well studied because by this point vanilla LoRa is pretty well established and robust form of post training for almost any post training researcher. The clear trade-offs are the fact that it does require for your model to be in BF16 or FP16 precision. It has a moderate training speed and not very viable for large models or consumer hardware. So essentially, I would only recommend you to choose vanilla LoRa when you have a GPU, reasonable GPU memory, a predictable or like a stability in terms of efficiency. You want to be a part of a mature ecosystem, or you plan to merge adapters for production. So that's one side of things. Uh, but once vanilla LoRa was out of the picture, a lot of people then moved to QLoRa or quantized LoRa. Now, quantized LoRa ends up, uh, as the name suggests, it makes it more accessible for developers to analyze and use LoRa on the go because it's as a paper that was cited in 2023, originated in 2023. It's been widely cited, and the key parameters for this is that the single GPU fine tuning at scale that it provides is almost unparalleled because it basically brings LoRa to almost every single cloud that you could find out there. Uh, it is primarily used or many times used for academic research on limited budgets. Startups or small scale enterprises that don't have a dedicated ML infrastructure do end up using these, and many times is used in edge deployment scenarios, basically allowing you to do LoRa on lesser hardware with a couple of trade-offs along the way. You get to the real world use cases include being able to fine tune 30 to 70 billion or even larger parameter models on a limited hardware, or a constrained hardware, and is many times not just because of the hardware constraints, but also when you have to run iterative experimentation for A/B testing with 5 to 10 different model variations. is a very practical use case for it. In terms of performance advantages, you'll primarily find QLoRA advantages for memory reductions and for double quantization and paged optimizers, so that memory crashes are less frequent. The trade-offs clearly is that it's 39% slower training, and it has accuracy loss. So you'll usually have to recover that with some hyperparameter fine tuning, but essentially is a trade-off for training and running on edge devices. Obviously it's a little more complex to debug when things go wrong, but that's a lesser or a lesser evil that people usually end up taking in exchange for the comfort that they get by, or the advantages that they get for the access of hardware that they can run the models on. So essentially, you just use QLoRA when your GPU is a primary GPU memory is a primary bottleneck. Either you need to fine tune models that you can't really load onto your hardware. Your training time is flexible, and you want unmerged adapters for inference flexibility, or you're experimenting on edge or consumer hardware where you would want to run your models in the long run. So QLoRA turns out to be a memory efficient model, but our next one, which is DoRA, is a performance or a performance system. So it is one of the more growing LoRa variants, which took a rise, or which had its initial coverage in 2024, but it's been gaining citations ever since, and has been adapted by a lot of different labs like Meta, Microsoft, other top universities. And the reason for that is DoRA keeps showing up in wherever you need to have a performance improvement in LoRa, and that's been proven time and time again on parameters such as GSM 8K or common reasoning parameters, and on benchmarks with the same rank as LoRa. It keeps outperforming LoRa over and over again, going on to show that it's an effective method. And the efficiency that DoRA shows is primarily attributed to the fact that it's not reflective of additive decomposition, instead multiplicative decomposition, as LoRa usually uses the weight updates by original weight, adding that with the product of the adapters, whereas DoRA tends to use multiplicative decomposition, as you can see here. So the decomposition of weights is not just scalar; it updates into the magnitude and the direction. So whereas LoRa just applies the directional component. So in that senses, DoRA does seem to outperform LoRa, both theoretically as well as the statistically, as shown and seen by many experiments by this point onward. Uh, you'd essentially choose DoRA where the accuracy is paramount. You can afford a little bit of extra compute. Using lower ranks is preferred. You would not want to scale to higher ranks because that would be a expensive computational overhead. And your tasks are primarily attributed to common sense reasoning. That's where primarily DoRA comes into play. Moving on, the next method we see is PISA. So far we've seen vanilla LoRa, which is the raw robust place you'd go to. You can choose QLoRA. Oh, the Mac camera. You can choose LoRa. You can choose QLoRA if you want something quantized. You can choose DoRA if you want good performance. But now if you want to have like a faster convergence, you would go to PISA, where it's like a rapidly growing architecture, and a lot of these upcoming companies are adapting it these days. We are seeing some 280 281 citations across the board. And the key innovation that PISA is showing is that it has a smarter initialization. So instead of initializing A and B like LoRa does, where LoRa just initializes A with Kaimin initialization, or as you can say sometimes Gaussian noise, and B with just a zeros of matrix. PISA basically initializes it with the principal SVD components of the original weight W. And this is important because this actually speeds up how fast the adapters actually converge to the necessary performance. And this is often also seen in terms of performance advantages. For example, on the GSM 8K benchmark, PISA scores are 86.05%, whereas QLoRA is 81.73%, and that's obviously far better than what LoRa performs. And what is notable is that PISA performs exceptionally well with quantization. So PISA with QLoRA is often a very preferred method. So when you would ideally want to choose this, again, using QLoRA is a very good combination with PISA. That's something you would want to go, and it's called QPISA sometimes. Uh, Training, when you want to have like a faster training, or you want to run really fast hyperparameter sweeps, or like you're just running an average accuracy benchmark computation. So basically at any point where, or either you have like a budget of SVD computation, so basically at any point where you need to have like a faster convergence or a fast speed in training, or essentially convergence in the end of the day, is where you would use PISA. uh, Moving on to our next method, we move to rank stabilization LoRa, or RS LoRa. So standard LoRa suffers from a problem of effective rank collapse. So when the rank increases, the larger ranks don't really help because the gradients become too small, and that's a problem called rank collapse, which is commonly occurrent with LoRa. So in order to solve that, rank stabilization LoRa uses a factor of a square root scaling, which basically stabilizes LoRa in the long run. And so if you are planning to use a larger rank, let's say 64, 128, or something even larger, where standard LoRa would stop improving, then RS LoRa is where you would want to go. If you have like a compute budget but want a final model of smaller size, or like multitask adaptation, where you would essentially need a larger rank. So essentially, in cases where you would require a large rank, is where you would use RS LoRa. That is your take here. Eventually, we are seeing RS LoRa and the scaling factor from RS LoRa adapted in a bunch of different places across bunch of different methods as well. So this has been a standing ground for a lot of different other LoRa variants that have come across lately. So this is all on RS LoRa. There are a couple of other LoRa variants that are, these are not so commonly used. These are more of academic purposes, academic oriented. For example, you could use LoRa Fa or LoRa Freeze A, where you essentially freeze the matrix A and only train B. And this basically reduces your activation memory, and the closed form gradient correction that you get out of the B matrix is also very helpful. So in the long context, you would only essentially use this where you like have a very long context training, and where your activations are trying to dominate the memory, and you're trying to reduce the activation memory, which does become sometimes of a bottleneck. But the adoption of this is relatively low, on the lower side, and but we are seeing like an academic interest growing on the end. Then there is LQ-LoRa, or learning quantization, which is like a take on QLoRa but an adaptive quantization. So it's more sophisticated than the 4-bit quantization that we often see. And its target is to adapt to the like a memory budgeting situation. So you are basically going to use this where you're looking for better or more favorable performance than the standard QLoRa, but you're willing to make a trade-off between the memory and the performance of the model itself. So these are two more methods. And finally, last but definitely not the least, we have our final LoRa method, LoRaga, or LoRa with gradient approximation. So in terms of real world adoption, this is a very emerging variant for LoRa, and has been recently implemented by a guy named Sambhav Noob Coder, or Sambhav Dikshit, recently into PEFT. The PR is still open, but it's hopefully gets merged soon. That's yours truly, by the way. So it's a really exciting method, and it's a 2025 research paper, and it has significant benchmark improvements as well. The core innovation is obviously the gradient informed initialization where the A and the B, the lower adapters are basically initialized with the SVD of the full fine tuning gradients. So they are task aware. So instead of wasting a good amount of your training budget on learning how to learn and what to learn, LoRaWAN essentially captures the task specific gradient directions from the full fine tuning initialization itself. It essentially has a better initialization, and everything else remains the same as the robust LoRa. And the only places where you could think about thinking twice for using LoRaWAN are where its trade-offs go for its overhead, since there is a temporary memory for gradient capture, and it is slightly more complex than PISA, or a little less complex than DoRA. So, if that's something you could keep in mind, that's another point to be taken into account. But that's roughly about it for LoRa, GA at least. And if we move on to our summary, to a basic decision tree of choosing the right LoRa variant, it's really quite evident. If you are on a GPU constraint, you should go for QLoRA. If that's not the case and you need faster convergence, you should go for PISA. If you need maximum accuracy, you can try for PISA or DoRA. If you have a large rank requirement, then you should try RS LoRa. If you need long context, then you can try LoRaFA. Otherwise, if you need tied embeddings, you can try for an tied LoRa. But in most of these cases, if you are by the end of the hierarchy and you still haven't figured out, you can probably use vanilla LoRa, or some like QLoRA in many cases, or LoRaWAN for that matter of fact, and that works out pretty fine, pretty evident, pretty clearly. So that's it on my part for this video. And please feel free to follow me on my socials. My Twitter is Sambodikshit Pro, and my LinkedIn and all my other socials you will find in the description down below. As well as, if you really want to check out how LoRaWAN works, you'll find a really cool video with me explaining the mathematics and everything else about this method on my YouTube channel, with the title Laura Guy Explained. And yeah, I think that's it for today's video, and we'll stay in touch, and uh, more such videos rolling in soon. Till then, peace out, take care, bye.